Live with Lisa Michaels show. It is usually on every month live, and tonight it's live on October 18th. But this is the only debate that you will see for the Attorney General Office of Oregon, because the Democrat candidate, the interim Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum, has dictated that she will not be in the same room with the Republican nominee, the brilliant James Buchal. And we also have a wonderful candidate from the Progressive Party. This was Chris Henry, and replace the interim Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum, who is represented tonight by the empty chair. So I'm the moderator, I'm the host, my name's Lisa Michaels, so let's get right down to it.
I'm running for Attorney General because I'm very upset with the rule of law. I think we have lost the rule of law. We've lost the ability to hold the government accountable. We have a situation in Oregon where over and over again we see immense debacles in public policy and no one's held accountable. I think that's because we've had a culture too long with people who come from inside the government, and they see the government as the answer to everything, and they see protecting the government from when it screws up as their important job. I like to say that my role as Attorney General is to do justice for the people and not to just win cases for agencies. And so I've spent my life litigating against the government. I've had many unfortunate experiences in that regard, like last Monday when we tried to get them to enforce a statute that said they should destroy the blank ballots immediately after 8 p.m. on election night. And they said they didn't know what the statute meant, so we had to keep this stash of blank ballots. And I go through experiences in the courts like this, and I begin to think that it's time that we bring a new culture to the Attorney General's office that's about implementing the will of the people and not just about protecting government misconduct.
What is it that you think is the seminal issue in Oregon, facing Oregon?
A major issue facing Oregon now is the economy. And we have a government that is out there essentially kicking business in the knees and beating them about the face and head every time they try and do anything. And so the most important thing that I can do as Attorney General is to begin in these cases where the agencies are beating people about the face and head, to look at the laws that they're using and say, you know, is that really what the legislature intended? Because the biggest thing that the Attorney General does is give advice to agencies. He can give advice to legislators too, but they're the ones who pass the laws, and then they wind up on the Attorney General's plate, and he can only sort of interpret them for the agencies. So I would push very hard on that. I also have a very keen interest in pushing back on the federal government, because the federal government owns 53% of Oregon, and they are not generating any economic value with that whatsoever for the most part. Instead, they are incinerating it. They have incinerated $10 billion worth of Oregon income in the past few years. And I would like to lead an effort with the legislators to begin to challenge federal power by asserting the sovereign rights of the state of Oregon to protect the health and welfare of its people by requiring there to be timber cutting and management when there's these dangerous fuel loads that are causing forest fires and choking smoke and burning up people's houses and ranches. As the Attorney General, as I say, you get hit with these laws, and then your job is to interpret them. Now, I take a very sort of what's now an old-fashioned view of the Constitution, although I think it's the only sensible view, which is that the idea of the Constitution was to constrain the power of the government. And I don't think under the Constitution the federal government has any business telling us what kind of services we have to buy or not buy. It's not one of the constitutional powers, period. And people who think it is are just, they're educated idiots. You know, they have no understanding of the history of the thing or why we would want to limit government power. So to the extent that I can, I will fight against this, but when you have a legislature that goes out and passes its own version of mini Obamacare and is all anxious to sign up for this stuff, you know, the most you can do is try and implement it in a way that does the least damage possible, which is very difficult to do when you have something as damaging as government and healthcare. You know, people don't understand that the government has caused the entire healthcare crisis by saying you can't build any more hospitals, you can't build any more medical schools. You know, if you want to turn one kind of bed into another bed, you have to go through $40,000 worth of administrative procedures. You know, it's everything has been regulated to the point where less and less and less supply. You know, and it's all about having more doctors and more hospitals, and yet you'll never hear that in any government discussion about health care. It's all about how can we have an army of people other than doctors and nurses making decisions about your health and rationing it and death panels and all this nonsense. It's a very disturbing development in our country.
So I think the experiment of the capitalist type of pure for-profit healthcare has been a failed experiment.
I guess my opinion is we haven't tried it yet. We haven't had a free market in healthcare in this country since about 1925 or something, when the American Medical Association sort of was formed and began wiping out all the alternative forms of healing that were in the country and quite widespread. It's hard to see how screwed up things are. So many things you say are correct about the evils of having these large corporations, but people don't understand that those things were in a sense created by the government. You know, we look at paying $1,000 a month for health insurance, and then we should think about, well, what would it be like if we were totally free to make whatever arrangements we want? What if you were a doctor and you could say, I'm a doctor, I want to make my $500,000 a year, all I need is 500 patients. No, I need 500 over 12. I don't need that many patients to make 500,000 a year if they're paying me 1,000 a month, and I can use some of that to go to the hospital. But the whole system is, all these corporate things that you talk about are enabled and required by the regulations themselves. In a free market, the doctors would have patients and people would subscribe to them, and there might be some of this entity and some of that entity, but the government got in there and said and began creating this massive tax bias toward having everybody do health care through these large entities because it could be this benefit that wasn't charged any income tax on it. And the whole system has been tweaked in 100 ways that it's very hard to describe, but there is an alternative, and we've never tried the free market system in healthcare, not for almost a century now.
What do you think, Ellen Rosenblum, who's absent here today because of the fact that she refuses to be in the same room with James Buchal? So what do you think she would think about the healthcare system? And of course, we know that the governor is the author of the first Abomination Care, the Oregon Healthcare Plan. So what do you think she'd think of that?
Well, there's a certain type of politician who views what they're doing as caring for people, and they view the government as the tool by which they will care for people. And so I think if she were here, she would say that this is a means for the government to care for people, and that this monopoly of caring, as it were, that's the philosophy. And unfortunately, that philosophy always ends up with this inefficient, disgusting monopoly that kills people. And I'm sorry, I just think that's the way it is. But you take a shot.
Well, I think Ellen would probably, I would have to side with Ellen if that would be her view, is that government should work for the people and it should care for the people. Then I believe, she and I would be sitting in the same chair on that issue.
Police power in the state of Oregon, and we have a police power to protect the health and welfare of the citizens. And we have seen this summer choking smoke over the whole state, and we've seen people's, ranches being burned up and houses being threatened. And we see that the management philosophy of the Forest Service in particular is a non-management philosophy. It's sort of just let this thing rot, let the trees fall over and rot until there's these huge fuel loads that are, in a fundamental sense, dangerous. I believe that the state has the power to insist that that danger be removed and to go in and cut those things itself if it wants to, because the Constitution, although it lets the federal government hold land, does not create any special powers in the federal government to violate local laws protecting health and safety. So I'd like to see a lot of that going on, and then maybe we can start to get some of the wood flowing again, and we can deal with this very serious drag we have on economic development in Oregon.